Get the latest Impact Podcast right into your inbox each week. Subscribe by entering your email address at impactpodcast.com to make sure you never miss an interview. This edition of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by ERI. ERI has a mission to protect people, the planet, and your privacy, and is the largest fully integrated IT and electronics asset disposition provider and cybersecurity-focused hardware destruction company in the United States, and maybe even the world. For more information on how ERI can help your business properly dispose of outdated electronic hardware devices, please visit eridirect.com. This episode of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by Closed Loop Partners. Closed Loop Partners is a leading circular economy investor in the United States with an extensive network of Fortune 500 corporate investors, family offices, institutional investors, industry experts, and impact partners. Closed Loop's platform spans the arc of capital from venture capital to private equity, bridging gaps and fostering synergies to scale the circular economy. To find Closed Loop Partners, please go to www.closedlooppartners.com. Welcome to another edition of the Impact Podcast. This is a really special edition and special to me because today we're so honored to have with us today Miyoko Schinner. She's an award-winning chef. She's the founder and former CEO of Miyoko's Creamery. She's the founder and current board chair of Rancho, Compasión, the author of The Vegan Creamery, which we're going to talk about today, and a lecturer at UC Berkeley's Haas School of Business. Welcome, Miyoko, to the Impact Podcast.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me on. Really glad to meet you.
Glad to meet you. It's an honor to meet you. I've been enjoying your products for years, and to have you on the show is a dream come true for me personally.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
So, Miyoko, before we get talking about all the things I just mentioned that you're doing, because you are truly one of these fascinating human beings that is talented in so many areas and can do so much, can we first start with your beginnings? Where did you grow up, and how did you get on this unbelievably fascinating journey that you've been on your entire life, it seems like?
Yeah, no, I think the fact that I was born in Japan and then migrated to the United States at a young age and grew up in a family of entrepreneurs really kind of set the course. I think, many people grow up in one place. They're born, they're raised, they stay in that one place. They don't move around a lot. The bulk of the humans on the planet are like that. And the fact that when I was 6 years old, I got on a plane and moved to the United States and saw a completely different culture that, I had no idea what was going on. I didn't speak English or anything, but that was a huge awakening for me to realize that there were two cultures that were so different, people that thought completely differently. And it just I think it just kickstarted this idea in my head that, we humans are very complex. Wherever we are in the world, we're going to differ from each other. And I had the benefit of getting a taste of that and speaking two languages at a very, very young age. I was also raised by two entrepreneurs. My mother was a stuffed animal designer. So I grew up in Japan next to a rice paddy, but in this little house where little ladies came every single day. They put on their little white outfits, and then they sat on the floor and they sewed and stuffed these little animals all the time. And then my father and my mother started their own business. And it never even occurred to me that you would get a job. I thought if you wanted to work, you had to create something. So by the time I was, 8 years old, my dad gave me this little printer, and it was a way to make carbon copies. And so I started my own little newspaper, which I sold up and down the street, called the Oakdale Chronicle, because we lived on Oakdale Avenue. Wow. And then, that was what I thought, was that you created something and you sold it. And that was just what I grew up. I never had a job, to be honest, except in high school. I did get a summer job as a Fuller Brush salesperson.
Oh, I remember
Fuller Brush. Going door to door and selling. I hated it. And I worked in my share of restaurants in high school and college as well, too. But after college, I never actually had a real job. Wow. I just always started my own businesses.
To be an entrepreneur in Japan when you were born, was much
It,
more unique than
it
being
was.
an entrepreneur in the United States. So
I
what
Yeah.
happened? How did your
Well,
parents?
I think it was by necessity. So this is post World War II.
Right,
So
right,
this I was born in 57. So I'm older
yeah,
than you.
right.
And my mother was at the time a single mother. So
Ah,
my father is my father, or was. He's
right,
dead now,
right.
but he hadn't married her. So she was a single mom in a country where that was sort of forbidden. But at the same time, it wasn't like there were job opportunities available. Their house in Tokyo was bombed. Her parents had died. Her brother was killed in the war. And, you had to figure out how to make ends meet. And she had this talent of making things. And so she apparently there was a toy company that had a contest because they were looking for products to sell. And she submitted one of her stuffed animals and she won. And that kickstarted this little business. So she ended up becoming a supplier for this toy company, and that was kind of how it started with her. And so I grew up with this very strong, mother figure. Even though I was a single child, I was a bastardly child in Japan at the time. She hid that stigma from me, and I never realized that that's who I was. I had this idea that I would someday live in America, and so I kind of grew up with this idea of a wide horizon, like nothing was impossible. Like there was this land called America that I was going to move to at some point. My mother never told me that my father wasn't planning to marry her or anything. She hid everything from me. She was such a strong woman. And
Oh,
eventually, I guess, his conscience got the better of him and he ended up marrying her and bringing us both to the United States. And then they started their business. But, I really think that reflecting back on my journey, my life now, I realize that it really has its roots in my mother
right.
and how she raised me. Despite all odds, she made a life for herself, where I'm sure she was stigmatized, in
Yeah.
Japan, and but she never let me feel that for a single second.
When they came, what was the impetus for them coming as two entrepreneurs to the United States? They just wanted a place that was more receptive of entrepreneurship, or is there other reasons they
Oh, so I didn't clarify that. My dad was an American who met my mother during the occupation.
understood?
And so he went back to America, and this happened a lot. Soldiers would come over, and they would,
Oh,
and
okay.
he didn't plan to marry her. And I actually have his letters, and I've read some of them. And he's like, I don't really plan to marry her, but what am I going to do with a child? Japan's not a great place to grow up. That's impoverished, blah blah blah. Because it really was back in the
Right,
late 50s, early
right.
60s. But at some point, I think his conscience eventually said, you do the right thing.
Right.
And so he brought us over here.
Oh, got it.
So that's kind of, how I ended up here in the United States.
Got it. So,
Yeah.
so your Schinner was your dad's last name?
No, that's actually my ex-husband's name. I'm trying to figure out what do I do with that name?
Okay,
But no, so it's complicated. I was born Takano. That was my
okay.
last name in
Takano.
Japan. My
Got it.
dad's name was Porter, John Porter.
Okay.
And then later on in life, I married a Schinner. So anyway,
So
so
you
that's where I am. But I'm
Takano
divorced now. So I'm
to
just Miyoko, quote unquote. So that's the only thing that's been stable my whole life. That's the only, yeah. Everything else has changed. So I've always been Miyoko. I will remain Miyoko.
So then I love it. And that's how I know you, because I've been
Mhm.
buying Miyoko's products for years, just because it's always your name on all the plant-based products that I buy. So that's how I know you anyway. So it's I think that's a great way to be known. Talk a bit. Okay, so you go to high school, college in the United States. When did you get on the journey of plant? What was the impetus for your plant-based eating and then living and then becoming a chef?
Yeah, so I actually became a vegetarian when I was 12 years old. Went on a school camping trip. I got put into the so-called vegetarian group, and we had to all cook in our little groups.
Right.
And it was the worst food in my life. I tasted
Right.
like boiled millet, and I was like, this is really gross.
Yeah.
And so I could not wait to eat meat. And I got back home. My mother put pork chops in front of me, and I don't know what happened, but like all of a sudden, maybe it was the conversations we had with about why we are eating a vegetarian diet. I don't know,
Right.
but I just couldn't eat it. I pushed it away. it didn't look like food to me. It was like, this was an animal. I can't eat it. I pushed it away. And literally that day, that meal, I just became a vegetarian. I never looked back. I never struggled. But the real impetus for learning about cooking came a couple of months later when my mother announced that she was no longer going to cook separate meals for me. She says, and I think it was because she was trying to get me to, re-engage with the family meals and eat meat again.
Sure.
And she said, I'm not cooking for you anymore. You're on your own. And I was, 12 and a half or so. And I said, fine. And I learned how to cook. I was that stubborn. And my mother absolutely hated me for it, that, she felt like America had ruined me, that I was no longer this sweet Japanese girl, but I was now defiant and rebellious. And I think that's been my nature my whole life. But anyway,
Independent.
so
You
that,
were
yeah.
independent. You took on the American independence type of personality.
Very, very quickly. And I quickly became uh, in love with cooking. I grew to love cooking, and I read. My parents had the Time Life series. If you, The Good Cook, I think that's what it
Right.
was called. And I
Right.
literally read everything, including the parts about meat, because I wanted to understand just general techniques.
Right.
And over time, I just learned how to do things. And then when I went back to Japan after college, and during my 8 or 9 years in Japan, I became a vegan. And because I read an article from while I was in America about the dairy industry, and I hadn't realized how cows were treated. And after I read that, I decided I needed to give up dairy as well. And it was kind of a slow transition. I can't say I went vegan overnight. I was a vegetarian, but I started to let's just say I only ate dairy. If I during let's say at Christmas and there's like a wonderful cheese platter, I
Right.
couldn't turn it down. I mean, cheese was really hard for me to give up. For
Uh,
me, cooking meant, the Julia Child way, which is, add a pound of butter. And it's all, I mean, that was just the way I thought that's how you cooked. You always added butter and heavy cream and a pound of cheese, and it was delicious. So
Wonderful.
I had to figure out then, like, how do I create something that will satisfy me, something that's unctuous, full of umami, that's rich, that's luxurious to eat,
Right.
not just macrobiotic, not
Right.
to say that I was against brown rice or anything, but how do you celebrate those special occasions with something that's really, really rich? And so I started experimenting in my little Tokyo apartment. And the way I got started in business was I started inviting people over every Friday night for a 12-course meal.
Wow.
And I just tried to veganize everything. It was a tasting menu, and I would get feedback from people. What worked, what didn't work, and then people would invite other people, and eventually, all these people that were in the industry, in food and in restaurants, started coming, and I started working in the industry, doing cooking demos, developing menus for cafes and restaurants, writing articles, and that was sort of like the origin of that. And I started a little wholesale bakery where I made pound cakes.
Oh,
And a pound cake, do you know how much a pound cake weighs, John?
I don't.
It weighs a pound.
Come on.
Yes. So
Oh,
it weighs a
oh,
pound, and I didn't have a car, but I had a backpack, and I could fit 70 of them in my backpack. And so I delivered them all over Tokyo by subway with a big backpack on my back. So I was a bit younger back then.
wait a second. Now,
I got a good workout every time I had to make
wait, first of
deliveries.
all, I want to go. I want to glance over the fact that I've lived 63 years and didn't know a pound cake weighed a pound. I want to glance over that fact. I want to go back to a history. What was your what was your dream or goal when after college in the US and you were already this young independent, now American citizen with Japanese roots, living in the US in the land of milk and honey in Northern California, where
Mhm.
so many companies have been born and still are born. What made you get back on a plane and go? What were you searching for? What was your goal when you went back to Japan?
Yeah, I felt like the first 6 or 7 years of my life were missing.
Mm.
There was just something that um, I just felt like I needed to get back in touch with who I was originally.
Search of your
Um,
roots. You were
I
back.
was searching my roots,
I love it.
and actually that show Roots was on at the time, but that
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
that wasn't
I
it.
get it. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And
It
did
was
you
just
have
a very
family still
personal
there?
journey.
Did you still have family there too when you went back?
I had aunts and uncles and a few cousins, but that was it. My parents, my my mother's brother was still alive, but other than that, everyone had, been killed in
Got
the
it.
war and so on. So
So,
yeah, not a huge family.
so you self-developed this wonderful skill set of being able to make an array of vegan foods, veganized foods.
Yes.
When was the decision to then leave Japan and come back to the United States and commercialize what you're doing?
Well, that's where the Yakuza come in.
Okay.
Do you know who the Yakuza are? It's
Yeah,
the
I'm a little bit
Japanese
nervous now.
mafia.
I'm a little bit nervous now. I mean, I thought you were this sweet plant-based chef with wonderful books out and a lecture in business school, and now you're talking like Tony Soprano. So I want to hear more, of course.
Okay.
Hear more.
Well, so as it turns out, I had gotten involved with a bunch of different people, making products and doing demos and, developing restaurant menus, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, yeah.
And I happened to meet this so-called businessman who had a restaurant. And we were going to go into business together. Well, it turned out he was connected to the Yakuza. It's just like in New York, New Jersey back in the day.
100%.
I mean, it
100%.
was, yes. And so what was going to be for me, I wasn't planning to get involved with the Yakuza. And when that became apparent, and I wouldn't go along with the things they wanted me to do and the things they, had me, my life became miserable. I literally started getting phone calls all hours of the day and night, people knocking on my door at 3 a.m. They burned all my professional bridges, meaning they called up all the companies that I was currently working with and told them not to work with me. It threatened them. And I lost overnight. When I wouldn't go along with the things they wanted me to do, I lost all my gigs, all my put, and I couldn't work anymore. They said if you don't sign this contract, and basically they were going to just own me, and I was going to have to pay 50% of everything that I ever earned to them. I said no. I had to get out of Dodge. I had no work anymore, and not only that, but I was scared for my life. And I went to the police, and the police said, well, we can't do anything. You haven't been physically harmed yet. And I'm like, I'm not waiting until I'm physically harmed
Right.
before, so I got out of
You might not
Dodge. I
have a
came
second
back.
chance at that point. You might,
Yes.
so wait a second.
I literally ran away from Japan. I literally got on a plane and I just disappeared.
Seriously speaking, though, was he interested in you as a girlfriend? Was he interested in your food?
Yeah, no, he is not as a girlfriend. He was married, but he
Right,
just was interested, and his, whoever the
right,
people that were
right.
backing him in everything I did professionally.
So did
So
he think
whether it
your food
was
had a big,
the restaurant,
he
yeah,
saw a big opportunity with what you were doing?
yeah. So he thought it would be
Uh,
very lucrative, but I was going to have to give, whether I wrote a book or opened a restaurant or
yeah,
I had all these little gigs lined up,
right, right.
teaching and all of that. They wanted 50% of everything I did, and
So,
I just said no, I can't do that.
and then they exerted their muscle and their
Yes,
tactics, and then you had to go just
I
for
had to
safety
go.
and everything.
Yes,
Okay, so now you come back to the United
yeah,
States. You leave all your contacts there.
yes.
You created a nice network of contacts and a skill set that
Hmm.
at least the skill set was very transferable. And now you're back in the US. What part of the US did you come back to? Northern California?
Yeah, I came back to Northern California. I moved in with my parents briefly until I got an apartment in San Francisco. And then I started doing a little bakery again. And back then, this is in the like 1990 or something. I wrote my first book, got it published by a small publisher then.
Okay.
But, back in the 1990 or so, you could bake in your own home, throw your cakes in the back of your Volvo station wagon and deliver them to Whole Foods. Today
Wow.
you couldn't do that. You'd have
Right,
to,
right.
it has to be made in a certain facility and you have to go through distributors. So back then you could pretty much do anything. And so I did. And that was kind of how I resurrected myself. It was really hard to, make a living. because I could, it was hard to scale, obviously, trying to make
Yeah.
something out of your home. But anyway, that was kind of how I got started back
And
here in
what
the,
was the first? What was your first book called?
it was called The Now and Zen Epicure. It's out of print now,
Okay. So,
but it had a picture of pâté en croûte on the front.
oh
So it
wow.
was very French.
Right, right. But it was French, but very French, but everything was veganized inside.
Yes, yeah, it was
Oh,
French, Italian. It wasn't strictly French, but it was very heavily influenced by, my learnings from Julia Child and other French authors.
so now, yeah, so exactly, because back then everything was about being a French chef. French chefs
Yes, yeah,
were the ultimate of
exactly,
chefs.
exactly.
So talk a little bit about what was it like? Because I remember, you and I are still very close in age, and I remember when I announced to my family that I was a vegetarian, they literally thought a Martian had come and infected me, and that something was truly wrong.
Right.
What was it like on the West Coast being a vegan in San Francisco back in the 80s and 90s? What was that like for you?
It was a little weird. I mean, there was a vegetarian society,
Okay.
and I found out about them, very quickly. And so I felt like I had some connections, but I can tell you, even among the members of the Vegetarian Society, no one was quite sure how to pronounce vegan. So it was like some people said vegan, some people said, vegan, some
Vegan.
people said vegan. I mean, like no one really knew what's the correct pronunciation. So,
Oh
I
my
mean, that
gosh.
was what it was like back then. And it's kind of funny. And then, the people that were vegan tended to be kind of older and just dour like this. And it was, it wasn't this movement full of light and
Right.
enthusiasm and health. It was just kind of this, yeah, older people that had just sort of given up and are happy to eat. I remember like they used to have these potlucks, and I'm because I like to cook, I would bring something really delicious and I would bring a lot of it to make sure everyone had plenty. But the potlucks were full of people that would bring like one Chinese container full of something that they had made, maybe a reused Chinese container. And
Right.
you'd taste some of this stuff, and it literally tasted like someone had taken a syringe and sucked all the flavor out of it. Like
Oh,
it just was so awful. It was like,
right.
no one's going to go vegan if this is what the food tastes like.
Exactly. I
So,
remember just becoming vegetarian and everything basically tasted like dust back in. I lived.
yes.
I had the ability of being in New York City, but it still wasn't a big community of vegetarians or plant-based eaters. So it was very few and far between to find any good food, really. So I credit Suen for basically raising me. Every meal I could. It was, thank God they had an outpost downtown by NYU where I ended up going to college, and I would eat there as much as I could because that was to me the best food in Manhattan and New York City. Talk a little bit about, now you did the first book. Where was the evolution to starting Miyoko's Creamery? How did that come about? And what was your journey from the first book and being back in San Francisco to Miyoko's Creamery?
Yeah, so that took a little while. I mean, it wasn't a straight trajectory. I opened up a little restaurant in San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
Um, and if you've ever read Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential,
Yep. Yep.
everything that happened in that book happened at my restaurant. I had the heroin addict chef. I had the
Right.
manager who was stealing from the till and crashed the truck. I mean, I had the chef that didn't show up one night, and I had to go down there with I just had a newborn baby with a baby on my back and get in the kitchen. I'm like, it was just, I didn't know what the hell I was doing back then. They didn't really have software programs to prevent that kind of thing.
Right.
And so it was just a disaster, but we got some critical acclaim. But beyond that, I made absolutely no money. But I was serving something at the restaurant on Thanksgiving called the Unturkey, which was a recipe I had published in my first cookbook, and it was a turkey that has skin on it. And this is before tofurkey. I was serving this, and
Right.
one day, and then tofurkey came out one year,
Yeah.
and someone said, you need to go to this trade show, the Natural Products Expo,
I know.
with your product. And I didn't know what a trade show was, but I went anyway. And I ended up writing $50,000 in orders that weekend. This is like in 1995, 96 or
Wow.
something.
Wow.
So
That's
I thought, okay, I got to get out of the restaurant business and I got to go into manufacturing. So I pivoted. I sold the restaurant and I started this, CPG, Consumer Packaged Goods Company, where we made meat alternatives. And I also had a non-dairy whip topping called Hip Whip. It's cooler than cool. Um,
Which you
and
were referring to Cool Whip then.
Yes, yeah. And then somehow I heard that, United Airlines was looking for a vegan cookie, low sugar, low fat. And so I literally just wrote them a letter and I made some cookies and I sent it to them. And like 2 weeks later, I had a contract. And I had a contract providing United Airlines. I made 10,000 cookies a day I had that contract for like 10 years, believe it or not. I mean,
Oh,
it was fun. Business was just done differently then. I
yeah.
can't imagine being able to, get a contract. But if you flew on United, you get this little, this package. The company was called Now and Zen.
Wow,
So, but anyway, so
that's
the
wonderful.
problem is, the company just, I got to a point, the company was pretty successful in that, we got nationwide distribution, but in the late 1990s, there was the dot-com boom, if you remember that.
Yep.
And and I got to a point, I had grown the company literally just on a loan I got from the city of San Francisco. So that's how I got started. And I had a few friends and family that, gave me, a couple $1,000s, $5,000, but nothing substantial. And we got to a point where, to get to the next step, I really did need an infusion of capital.
Mm.
And I couldn't find money anywhere. Like I was just searching, but I couldn't buy enough inventory for the fourth quarter sales or this, that, and the other thing. And I finally just decided, I can't continue. So I sold the company, not for very much, just to kind of, move on with my life.
Right.
And that was in 2003. And Miyoko's didn't start till 2014. So there was a 9-year gap when um, I raised kids. I got involved in some real estate projects, did very well with that.
Oh, good.
And then I got to a point when, I was over 50 and I felt like, well, is this it? I lived in this beautiful home in Marin County, had kids that had grown up. And I felt like, is this the long wind down? Like,
Right.
what's the meaning of my life? Like, I've never really succeeded in the businesses that I wanted to, because to me, providing vegan food was something that gave me not only personal um, satisfaction, but I felt like this was my way to add value to the world.
Right.
And I felt like I had never really succeeded at doing that. And the one area where I had succeeded was in real estate, which to me just felt like that was just about making money. It wasn't actually adding value. It
Right.
was just about making money. And I felt extremely hollow and empty inside.
Mm.
And so one day I said, I'm not doing this anymore. And I walked away from, doing real estate investments and 1031 exchanges. And I just decided I'm going to get back into food, whether or not it, earns me any money. So I started experimenting with vegan cheese. I felt like that was it was on my bucket list of things I felt like I'd never really conquered. I started playing around with it. And that culminated in giving a cooking demonstration at a festival. And I sampled out this cheeses and I thought no one's going to like it. No, I mean, back then, this is like maybe late 2000s. I thought like, no one's going to eat this stuff. And people were like, oh my God, you need to write a book. And so I wrote a book, Artisan Vegan Cheese, which I thought nobody will buy, but it did very well. And then I thought, I've given out my secret on how to make vegan cheese and people can go home and make it on their own. I'm never going to start a business, but people started saying, I love your book, but I don't want to make any of it. Can you just start a company? So I finally decided at the age of 57 to start Miyoko's Creamery. And that's what happened. I started then.
It's so funny. First of all, for our listeners and viewers, if you just joined us, we're so honored to have with us today Miyoko Schinner. She's an award-winning chef. She's a prolific writer. This was her latest book. I think this was her seventh or
yes, yeah, the seventh, yeah,
seventh book. And she's also a lecturer at UC Berkeley's Haas School of Business. And the founder of Miyoko's Creamery, which we're going to talk about a little bit.
And targeted by the Yakuza. You forgot that point.
Oh my God! Yeah, escaped the Yakuza. Escaped.
Yes.
Is able to live to tell and to find Miyoko. You can find her, and this will be in the show notes, so you don't have to stop driving your car or lifting weights or going for your walk. But you can find her at MiyokoSchinner.com. Miyoko, wait a second now. So I think cheese. It's so funny. Earlier in our conversation, you mentioned how you would still dabble in cheese because there were no great vegan cheese options back then. Me too. I would still always grab a piece of cheese if it was around or at an event. Never feel good after eating it, of course, but there really wasn't a lot of vegan options. So you were filling a massive void in the marketplace with what you were creating. How many different types? I know I've eaten it on a consistent basis, at least 3 or 4 of your different types of cheeses. How many cheeses did you end up creating that became commercial?
Well, initially we launched with 10 cheese wheels,
Okay.
which, after my departure from the company in 2022, they stopped making the cheese wheels. But the way I got the company off the ground was by launching these fancy cheese wheels packaged in these beautiful boxes.
Right.
And the whole idea was to prove to the world that, vegan food could be aspirational. It didn't have to be a sacrifice. And so I didn't want to launch with, slices and shreds and kind of, or cream cheese or anything that was middle of the road or
Yeah.
kind of low class. I wanted to launch with the highest quality products possible so that any people would go, wow, the package alone had to be beautiful. So people walking by, because you have literally like 2 seconds to grab someone's attention and you
Right.
want that package to pop and you want someone to go, wow, that looks really unique. What is it? And then, for them to take it off the shelf and read it and find out what it was. So that was my goal. So we launched with 10 different cheese wheels. Very early on, it was a really small enterprise. It was just 4 of us. And then we started adding more employees. We had a special flavor of the month on a regular basis. So we sold online initially. So you could get a different, keep people coming back and being able to try new flavors. Of course, most of them didn't remain, but the whole idea was just trying to make things as creative and mixing up the offerings all the time.
That's awesome. And how did, and what was the, you started the business, there's 4 of you. What was your aha moment during this journey where you said, okay, this is going to work. I'm now doing my passion and it's actually profitable.
Well, okay, so I mean, the aha moment was the day we opened. So we had to build a facility. So because there was no co-manufacturer that could make these products, because it started out by making cashew milk, which you had to ferment, and then you had to coagulate it, and then you had to age it, and you had to do all this stuff. And there was just no cheese facility or co-manufacturer that could do that. So we built a small facility. We were also going to have a little retail shop and cafe, but that never opened. And we were going to do online sales. We were going to keep it very local, very small. That was the idea behind it. And we opened up our online shop. And on a Friday afternoon, I don't know if that's the right day to open it or not, but we did. And by Monday morning, we had over $50,000 in orders.
Wow.
And we had 500 orders averaging $100 each. And that's when I realized that demand was there. So this exceeded our entire monthly projection for our first month's projection. And we had to scramble to be able to fill those orders because, it was a tiny little, it was all handmade and it was really tiny. And so, and then 3 months later, the regional Whole Foods came calling and they said, we'd like to carry your product. And we weren't planning to start selling retail, because we didn't think we could fill that demand.
Right.
But it was just too good of an opportunity. So then we ended up having to like ramp up sales and manufacturing. And that was really very, very stressful. I don't think I would do that again if I were to do it, because, growth, unfortunately, unregulated growth can wreak all sorts of havoc on on people, on profits, on everything. So, um, but the the conversation I had with an investor, this is when we started taking in real money because it seemed like everybody was calling us. And within a year, we were nationwide. We were in all these warehouses across the country.
Wow.
And it just seemed like the sky was the limit. And that's when I started raising serious capital and building out a new plant. Um, but, my original idea was to stay small, local, satisfy, prove the market there. But an investor said to me, "Don't you want to go big? Why are you trying to stay small? If you want to have impact on the world, you have to get big." And I listened to this investor and I thought, well, she's really smart because, she controls millions of dollars and I'm a novice and she's got to be right. And I kind of bought into that. And I think today, looking back on it, we can look at where the entire plant-based industry has gone. And just because you scale does not mean that you're actually making positive impact for
Right.
the planet, animals, or anybody. Sure, for the state, the investors, perhaps, but in terms of community, animals, planet, that's a whole different argument. So I would approach with a different type of enterprise that I'm considering starting now. I would approach it very, very differently.
Got it. Got it. So Miyoko's Creamery became let's just say, a massive success. I mean,
Yes.
I used to buy it at Whole Foods all the time while you were running it, and still remain a fan. But still, it's hard to really get behind a brand when the named person on the brand's no longer there. I don't know if Miyoko's got her hand on it anymore and that's what I always used to think. And that's when I started reading more about you and saying, I've got to get her on the show. So that's why I'm so honored about you being here today. But like I said, I was a huge fan. My family's a huge fan. And because cheese has always become the issue of how do we eat the cheese that we want to eat and still stay healthy. And to me, you had just one of the best brands out there, if not the best brand I've ever eaten. So hats off to
Thank
you.
you.
And I'm excited. So before you tease what your next venture is going to be, let's talk about some other things. Talk a little bit about what you've seen in the vegan trends. A lot's gone on, obviously, since you became conscious about what you were eating and where we are today in 2025, and with the explosion of Whole Foods and Erewhon and all these wonderful places that are trying to get good foods into the hands of more people. Where is the plant-based industry today, comparatively speaking, to when you started this journey, and where do you see it going?
Yeah, I mean, I really at one time thought that so-called market-based solutions, just switching the products that you sell, would be the solution to saving the planet, the animals, and humanity.
Mm.
I no longer think that. What happened after my departure, after I split ways with a company that I founded, was that I decided I really need to learn more about the food system. So I started reading lots of books on history of food systems in general, problems all over the world, like what was the Green Revolution? How did it impact communities in India and Mexico? What is GMO anyway, and what is it beyond its health impacts to human health or to the planet? But how did it impact economies in different parts of the world? This isn't, I talk about this in my class at UC Berkeley.
Right.
But when I started studying all of this, I realized that food system was very, very complex.
Mm.
That the idea that to really change it, we have to decommodified food.
Mm.
So food has become a commodity. For most of human history, we were mostly farmers. We grew food to feed our families, our communities, and it was a very collaborative process. We worked with each other. It wasn't a solo act. And it wasn't a get rich fast scheme at all. It was, how do we eat? How do we survive? And more than that, how do we nurture each other in body and soul by breaking bread together and having these beautiful conversations? Food is what brings us together around the table to celebrate life. And over the last, I would say, particularly over the last 50, 60 years, food has become a commodity that you go and buy. Today, 70% of what Americans buy comes from one of 10 multinational corporations. Even though you may see thousands of brands, they're pretty much all owned by 10 multinational corporations. And you're buying what, the advertisement tells you from the time you're young, eat this, eat that,
Right.
whatever it is, and you're hooked and you're indoctrinated into this system. And so in reality, we're really not free to choose. Like we're not really free to choose because we don't have we haven't had the freedom of knowledge. We were educated into this very narrow lane of what consolidated corporate powers wanted us to think about the food system. And so to really reclaim it and to save our own humanity, and this goes, for AI or every technology, for everything, like for us to become human again. I think it behooves us to really think about reclaiming our kitchens and learning actually how to cook again, and not just to feed ourselves, but to feed our families, our communities, to break bread with them, to reconnect with each other over food. And so that is where I want to take whatever I do in the future. I want food to be an impetus for bringing humanity back together in its roots, and for us not to say, oh, I need to buy this product versus that product. I mean, I think products aren't going away. We're all, we're all going to be wanting a little bit of convenience here
Right.
and there.
Right.
So that's not going to go away. But I think we need to reclaim ownership of the food system as individuals. If we have the ability to do that. Not everybody does, but if you have the ability to reclaim your kitchens by cooking fresh food, then I think that's something we need to do more of. In America, we spend less and less time every single year actually cooking and even eating. The average American only spends an hour a day eating and drinking versus people that live in the Mediterranean, Greece, France, Italy, and Spain. They spend 2 to 2.5 hours a day eating and drinking because it's a social activity. And we've forgotten that because we eat in front of our computers. We eat in our cars on the run. Food is no longer what ties us together. And I believe that we already have so many answers for saving the system, saving the world if we just look at food historically. We've just forgotten those foods. So we need to go back and revisit the foods that most of humankind has eaten over most millennia. And that is predominantly plant-based. In most parts of the world, we predominantly ate a very natural plant-based diet of legumes, vegetables, nuts and seeds, fruits, etc. And we need to go back and rediscover some of those beautiful cuisines, whether it's from Italy or Japan. I mean, the knowledge is already there. We've just chosen to forget it and we've opted for technological advancements in food.
Well, a couple of things. Since you mentioned Italy and Japan specifically, it's no shock that Italy and Japan are two of the blue zones
Yes.
of the planet for good reason. And what you said is so fascinating what you just said, because concurrent with the rise of those 10 or so food conglomerates, which seem to be in our lifetime, because you and I are same age, have created even more and more ultra processed foods.
Yes.
We've seen the rise since the late 90s, as you pointed out, the dot-com boom of technology and more isolation, because we all got more and more technologically savvy and involved with our technology, which was only then hyperscaled by COVID and made us more isolated.
Yes.
So you're saying, let's do it the other way. Let's take away ultra processed food and go back to simpler food, where it becomes then the center point of more of us getting back together again. Because as Buettner's pointed out, and all science has pointed out, the more connected we are to our communities and our families, the longer and happier we're going to live anyway.
Exactly. I mean, this is really the fear I have, is technology has crept into every sector of our lives, including food.
Right.
And, and money is being poured into what's called food tech. It's as if technology is the only way to solve the problems created by technology. And maybe.
Well, you're right, because I'm going to interrupt you. How do you stay isolated? DoorDash. You stay home, you stay in front of your TV. You don't even have to go out to a restaurant or bar. Again,
Exactly.
technology. So
Exactly.
you're exactly right. Keep going. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. I mean, that's really it. Is that,
Right.
I think at some point we have to just say no, stop, and we have to start dismantling this, the system, or the powers that are pushing us further and further into uh uh what's the word? Just being, you know, um
An isolation void. Yeah.
well behaved population that does whatever,
Yeah.
they want us to.
Right.
Um, so we have to become a little bit more rebellious. But we often talk about food sovereignty and how we've deprived communities of food sovereignty, which we have because of patented seeds and this sort of thing. But we also, I'm talking about what I call kitchen sovereignty. We have to remember how to cook again. We have to recall our ability to cook. I mean, let's just say there is some, I don't know, cyber attack. And this actually happened with UNFI, a major distributor, and their systems shut down, and literally stores are out of stock of a variety of things, like empty shelves, because the distribution channel just shut down, because we have a global system. It's not local anymore. If you live in the Midwest and you're surrounded by farms, just because you're surrounded by farms doesn't mean you can go down and buy fresh produce, because they're all growing just soy and corn,
Right.
for export, before the tariffs, of course. But we need to relocalize food. We need to some degree of globalization is fine, but we also need to increase localization, resurrect independent producers, small farmers who have all been pretty much obliterated, and actually get very little subsidy from the government. The larger you are, the more likely you're going to get subsidized by the government. If you're a small farmer growing fruits and vegetables, you're probably not going to get a penny, and you're just struggling to sell, find markets to sell those things to. So we really have to start taking care of our own communities, the producers in our communities. And I really want to create a food system that is more equitable and provides more opportunities for more producers. I mean, when I was in Miyoko's, I mean, I can tell you, you fly to Austin to Whole Foods, or you go to Target, Minneapolis, and you do these so-called headquarter calls, and maybe you're selling, a category of cheese or whatever. Well, in the waiting room, there's, 100 other people that are pitching the same types of products to the buyers, and you're hoping to be the one company that's going to get on that shelf. And what that, so when we got on shelf, that was like a major celebration. But what I didn't think about at the time was that me winning meant that 99 others lost.
Right.
And there goes their dreams, there goes their investment. But what if we were to democratize food and decentralize it, so all of these companies had an opportunity to make money and to sell to markets in their area? So this means that no one company makes a killing, but more companies can make a living. And I'm interested in creating a food system where more people get to make a living, not a killing. Like, we got to get over this idea that we all got to be ultra wealthy.
Yeah.
Let's just be happy making a living, being able to take your kids to the ball game, having a plant-based barbecue with your neighbors. Like, let's reinvest our efforts and our money back into our communities and uphold all of us, not just, those that have the money and the balls to strike it rich.
Well, it's nice to celebrate those folks, but to idolize them and make that the only dream left in America is a little bit really a false hope and ridiculous. You're right, and I applaud what you're saying tremendously. I was listening the other day to Andrew Ross Sorkin talk about his new book, 1929, and he gets to interview so many interesting titans of business. He was talking about the ultimate question when you talk to people: what's enough? What's enough? And he goes, the surprising answer he gets from so many titans of business, or masters of the universe, or whatever you want to, whatever the zeitgeist calls them nowadays, is they always answer more. And that's not necessarily the right answer, as you point out, because sometimes more doesn't lead to good.
It doesn't lead to good. It doesn't lead to happiness. And
No.
it just creates a lot of suffering on the part of others, and I guess at the end of the day, for me, food is a basic human right, should be a basic human right.
Right.
And we have commodified food, and we need to make food accessible and available and affordable for more people, so we can all join in on that celebration as we break bread together. That's, to me, like, when I think about what is the impact I want to have, the impact I want to have is uplifting everybody, not just myself. What does it mean if I succeed but others fail? I don't know if that's true success in my book.
That's true. I mean, as you point out, you and I could go for, we've been blessed with enough success to have this conversation, and we get to eat. As you say, there's millions of people. We forget that there's still in this country, this wonderful, great country, millions of people who go to bed hungry.
Yes.
It just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. In 2025, it doesn't make sense.
And also, I'm going to add, in terms of entrepreneurship and people that want to have impact, there's a million people out there that have great products. I mean, I know a lot of these people that have come up with interesting solutions, and they unfortunately never got off the ground because of the way the markets work.
Well, like you point out, I've sat in the offices of Unify and Whole Foods, and I've sat in the offices of Target and other great brands like those. And like you said, it's literally an entrepreneurial Game of Thrones.
Yes.
It really is. And so when you were saying it, I was remembering those same feelings you have. And it's win or die at that.
Exactly.
Your entrepreneurial journey. I want to come back to this in a second, because these are very important points you make for our listeners and viewers, who so many of them around the world are young and trying to figure out, how can they be like you? How can they make a living and make an impact? How can they make a living and make a paycheck, but still make a difference? So I want to come back to the important points you just brought up. Let's go back to a couple other hats that you wear. First of all, Compasión, Rancho Compasión and its mission. Why do you sit on the board? What's the mission at Rancho Compasión?
So Rancho Compasión is a farmed animal sanctuary and youth education center. We started out just as an animal rescue, but we quickly realized that it's not just animals. So we have farm animals like cows and pigs, goats and sheep, and that sort of thing. We quickly realized that it's not just animals that need rescuing. So we started a youth program. We have 600 to 1,000 students come through every year. And we work with students of different needs, neurodivergent, at risk, in foster care, et cetera. And they come here and they spend a day at underserved communities. And they come here and they spend a day in nature, getting to know animals, rescued animals, working in our organic garden, learning about our food system there. We don't lecture. We don't, talk about veganism or anything. We just nurture them as much as possible and let them enjoy and find peace themselves. Last week we had CASA, court-appointed special advocates, come here. We had about 50 kids from there. This week we've got Center for Domestic Peace coming here. We have kids from underserved communities. And we give them, it turns out there's a lot of schools that only have enough funding for one field trip a year. And so we try to provide extra field trips for them. So we pay for the bus and bring them out here and give them the opportunity to have a wonderful day in nature with animals and our garden. And I'm usually the lunch lady. I usually prepare the vegan lunches for them. So I might, this weekend I'll be cooking for another 50 people. And for me, it's just a way that I can give back. Because the goal basically is to nurture compassion in youth, because these kids, ages 5 on up, they're the future generation, and they are the ones that we want to nurture. I mean, if you look at what's going on right in the United States, I don't see a lot of compassion in our current government, and we don't want to normalize that. We want to normalize caring and the nurturing of other people and animals and the planet. We want to nurture a compassionate soul. And I think youth, young kids have that natural compassion until they become desensitized, until they've been told, to focus on yourself and individual success. And we want to focus on collaboration and community success. So that's what we do here at Rancho Compasión. If you want to learn more, you can go to our website, ranchocompasion.org. It's like Rancho Compassion, but only one S. And you can learn more about it there.
And we'll put the URL, the
Yeah.
website, in our show notes so all of our listeners and viewers can find it easily. Talk about the other hat you wear as a prolific writer. I mean, 6 books aren't enough. You have to write this beautiful 7th book, which I went through it the last 3 days. And my gosh, it's such a visual joy to go through this book. It's just amazing. Why? Tell me, why do you love to write, and why do you keep writing? And what was the impetus to write this beautiful book here, The Vegan Creamery, which everyone can buy at Amazon.com and any of their favorite bookstores across the United States?
Yeah, well, I write books because I want people to get back into their kitchens and cook.
Good.
Because I believe this cooking is an act of resistance. Cooking is a form of activism to reclaim the food system on our terms. So that's why I write recipes. And my recipes aren't just about how to make a casserole or a spaghetti sauce. They're really about how do you make the foundational foods that you would typically buy. So I have another book called The Homemade Vegan Pantry, and in it, you can learn how to make ketchup or pancake mix or whatever. All these things that you would typically buy, you can make them at home for 1/5 the price in just a couple of minutes. Obviously, the Vegan Creamery is a little bit more entailed because there's a lot of science behind what I'm talking about there. But basically, I don't believe, because I said before, food is a basic human right. I do not believe that food is an area where we should protect intellectual property. I believe food is something where we should share that IP with people so that we can engage more people in finding solutions to help the world, rather than, only one company or one individual, as an influencer getting all the accolades or whatever.
Right.
So I write cookbooks and make videos. I have a scrappy little YouTube channel called The Vegan Good Life with Miyoko. And I give away all my secrets, including how to make vegan butter, because I want people to get engaged. I have never found that giving away secrets aid into profits, because I think when you give away the secrets, you earn people's trust. And then they want to support you. And so, they're going to buy your products anyway, because it's like, yeah, I can make that vegan butter, but you know what? I'm at the store, it's available, and, it's easier for me. So they're going to do it anyway.
That's
So
right.
if you're an entrepreneur, don't think like, I got to get a patent or I got to protect this IP. Literally, like, you should be in the business of selling trust, not in the business of selling a product.
Yeah, but that's spoken like a true, first of all, that's a super evolved human being and also a super experienced entrepreneur. I'm just giving it to you straight, Miyoko. So many people see life as a zero-sum game. I see life the exact same way you do. This is a world of abundance. There's so much for all of us. And the more generous you are,
the more you get.
That's exactly it. But so many people don't. But I'm so glad you're sharing that, because we have a whole generation of young people that think that it's a zero-sum game. But when they hear someone like you with so much experience and so much success in your rearview mirror, I think you could help shift that old paradigm, which is just clearly wrong.
I hope so. Yeah.
I mean, so obviously you love sharing, and obviously you love democratizing information. Therefore, talk a little bit about how you do that as a professor and teacher and a lecturer at Berkeley. How does that work over there?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's, I never thought I'd go into academia. But a couple of years ago, I got a call from UC Berkeley saying, hey, do you want to be a lecturer? And I thought, this has got to be a joke. And I, literally, I was like, sure. And then I didn't think twice about it until, a month or two later, I actually got the documents in the mail, and I'm like, this is real. So anyway, I have a co-instructor, which is great. And so, I teach, this is my second year in teaching. I absolutely love it.
I was just going to say, you must love this.
I do, because, I am about trying to get people to think. I'm not there to give them the answers or tell them the way it is. I will ask questions. I want to give them some information, pros and cons, different points of view, and let the students navigate themselves and figure out what might be right. And so engaging young people is great. I have 3 kids. They're in their early 30s. And I remember when they were in their early 20s and, like they felt like they had to have everything like secured and all the answers right out the door right out of college. And I had to say, no, life is long. You got a long time to figure this out. And today I get a lot of students wanting one-on-ones with me, and I get to say the same thing again. And they're so appreciative. They're like, wow, I thought I had to have it all figured out. It's like, no, you don't. Don't, like
So
experience as
true.
much as you can now when you can. So I don't know. For me, teaching is something I never thought I would do, but I'm so grateful I have this opportunity. I thank UC Berkeley for giving me the opportunity. It's a wonderful community to be part of.
What's the title of your course that you teach?
It's called, well, so there's 2 courses, but it's a food systems course that centers on plant centric food systems
Uh-huh.
and what it would look like.
Yeah.
But, I try to bring in, we try to bring in kind of a global viewpoint of how it would look, how it impacts different communities. We look at it from different modules. What does it look like economically, from animal welfare, social justice, environmentally, all of that? We bring in excellent speakers from time to time as well, too, to address some of these issues. We talk about everything from, some of the stuff I've been sharing today to some, environmental impacts of our current food system, especially animal agriculture, a lot of it. Yeah.
Miyoko, I want to go back to where we started. Your mom, did she get
Yeah.
to live long enough to enjoy seeing her daughter, her only daughter, become a big success?
No, she
Oh,
passed away in 2000.
oh,
So it was, I was a struggling entrepreneur at the time, but she died young. And
that's too
so,
bad.
yeah.
But okay, but first of all, you look much younger than you are, and obviously you've been eating plant-based most of your life, so you're very healthy. I was just sharing with you off the air before we started this podcast how I just interviewed Martin Cooper a couple of weeks back, and he's the founder of the cell phone. He's 96, still inventing and clear as a bell, just like you are. So you have at least 30 or more years in
I'm hoping.
yeah. So, okay, let's talk about that though. Talk a little bit about your dream. How do you take your vision of the world, a more democratized world, a world where more people want to come together and use food as the excuse and the impetus to come together and share great food and have great conversations and make better human connections? Where do you see then the business model that you could effectuate to become part of that new paradigm that you want to happen here in the United States and actually beyond, much beyond?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I'm going to start up by saying I'm not 20 anymore. And so I have the knowledge that I don't have to have it all figured out, even at my age right now.
That's
And I
right.
have 30 more years, perhaps, to do different projects.
Right.
So I have a whole bunch of ideas. I
Okay.
don't have to have all the answers now, and I don't have to materialize or manifest all of them right now. But right now, I am talking with a group of people, like-minded people, and we are thinking about a food project. And it would be a different corporate entity. It'd be probably a cooperative. So worker-owned co-op that would distribute wealth among all the stakeholders. And I'm not going to go into the product right now, but that is something that we are thinking about. The reason we want to do it is we want to start chipping away at the food system and show how a different kind of model can create more economic equity for more people. So that is one project that I am considering right now. I'm also I've been talking to some other people. So my big goal is not only to democratize food, but do that through creating communities,
Right.
because we need to recreate communities. Humanity will not survive with more and more isolation and independence. We've got to figure out how we can recreate communities and how we can how every single one of us can add value to that community. Everyone is valuable. Most of us don't realize that. Most of us think like, well, what can I do? Well, you can do a lot. Everybody can. And so I want to help people somehow realize that they each have a potential contribution to give to some community. So I'm trying to figure out how to do that, but I am ruminating about some sort of community movement, but I haven't figured out how that would manifest. I'm open to ideas. Anybody wants to throw that out? Another fanciful idea that I have, and this is some friends of mine and I, because I love Italy, I go there at least once or twice a year, is to buy an abandoned village in Italy. There are so many of them. There's so many of them, and start the world's first vegan village with restaurants and all, so we had this crazy idea. Yes.
I'm buying a home. If you're doing that, and that's Miyoko's village,
yes.
My wife and I are buying a home in that village. Let me tell you, you've got the first homeowner in that village.
Okay. So that's another crazy idea I have, but I don't have to do it all at once.
Yeah.
Because, I've got another 30, 40 years left to do all these things.
Hey, and there's a woman Japanese PM now for the first time. So you're going to be the PM of veganism and entrepreneurial spirit coming together and changing the world that way. I think that's a great opportunity. Listen, first of all, I want to thank you not only for taking all this time with us today, Miyoko. I just want to say thank you from me personally. Like I said, to have you on the show is a dream come true for me, given that I'm a vegan. I'm also a huge fan of all your products. Thank you for your time today. For our listeners and viewers, everything we spoke about, will be in the show notes, all the links to Rancho Compasión and everything else we discussed, including, of course, MiyokoSchinner.com, where you can find Miyoko. Miyoko, thank you not only for an hour and 15 minutes of your time today, but most important, thank you for making the world a better place.
Thank you, John. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it.
This edition of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by Engage. Engage is a digital booking platform revolutionizing the talent booking industry. With thousands of athletes, celebrities, entrepreneurs, and business leaders, Engage is the go-to spot for booking talent, for speeches, custom experiences, live streams, and much more. For more information on Engage or to book talent today, visit letsengage.com. This edition of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by ERI. ERI has a mission to protect people, the planet, and your privacy, and is the largest fully integrated IT and electronics asset disposition provider and cybersecurity-focused hardware destruction company in the United States, and maybe even the world. For more information on how ERI can help your business properly dispose of outdated electronic hardware devices, please visit eridirect.com.